Hello everybody and welcome back to the Level Up English podcast. The best place to come to practice the English language, learn about the British accent and culture with me, your host, Michael Lavers. I am happy to be back with you again, and I'm also very excited for this topic today because this is something that I have a personal interest in, and I really hope that you enjoy it too. But what I try to do in many episodes is include some English stuff in there. So even if the topic is not your cup of tea, even if you don't enjoy the topic, at least you can maybe say you've learnt something new or you've practiced something. And hopefully this one will be no different because I'll be talking today about geographical superlatives. Now, I don't think I'm going to title the episode that because that sounds very confusing and I think many people won't know what I'm talking about. But you might know that I'm really interested in geography. I love learning about countries and places around the world, flags, that kind of stuff. I'm really into geography. So geographical is the adjective for geography, the noun. Superlative is like the most of something. This is kind of a linguistic grammar word. The most, the best, the highest, the smallest. So I'm going to be going around the world and talking about some fascinating geographical superlatives. Some of them I didn't know until researching this episode. So in this episode, we'll be talking about the highest city in the world, the most isolated island, the deepest part of the planet, what else are we going to look at? Hottest place on Earth, the driest place on Earth, place that gets the least amount of rain. So of course you'll be hearing lots of this grammar today, this most, highest, best. And you will notice that when we use EST or most, we say the highest or the highest, the lowest, the most, the worst, right? So always remember we say the with this structure. This may be easy for some of you, but it's always a good reminder anyway to return to the grammar again. And I might put a little bonus lesson up for members. So if you want to practice this even more with some bonus materials, don't forget to check the members website. If you're not a member, you can sign up using the link on your podcast app that says join Level Up English. And find out more there. Join me for some lessons. If you're still not sure whether it's a good fit for you, you can click the button that says, I think it says like get free lessons or something like that. So basically what that will do is sign you up to our email community, which is totally free, goes out twice a month. You get free lessons sent with each email. And in the first email, you also get 5 free lessons from Level Up English. And these are random lessons, like one is a podcast transcript, one is maybe a pronunciation lesson. I don't remember all of them, but you can get like a preview of what the membership is like. So even if you don't want to sign up to the membership, you can still get these free lessons and enjoy them, use them. So once again, you'll find links to these on whatever app you're using to watch or listen to me now. But I think we'll just get right to the topic now. So if you do like learning about random facts about our world, our wonderful world that we live on, then this will be the episode for you. I think it's going to be a fun one. So let's go all the way down, opposite side of the world, all the way over to Bolivia. And we're talking about the city of La Paz, which I'm sure I'm not pronouncing right, but it's something like La Paz. And do you know what this is? This is the highest altitude city. In other words, it's the city that is highest above sea level in the world. I suppose it depends how you define a city, but this is the official one. And it sits on the ground. It sits at about 3,640 meters That's almost 12,000 feet. So basically, if I am correct, is that right? No, that can't be right. I might be confusing this with a one in the future about the deepest. Okay, yeah, I'm very wrong. So I was thinking that's where planes fly, but planes fly at maybe 11,000 meters, not feet. So I'm totally wrong there. That'd be a bit dangerous if planes flew at that altitude because they would crash into the mountains. But what's interesting about this city is you might be aware that the high altitude can make you sick. This is called altitude sickness. So it's recommended to acclimatize by taking it easy for the first few days, or maybe coming up slowly. If you land in the city and then you run around, you might get really sick and out of breath from a lack of oxygen at that level. And I wonder as well, maybe people who live in La Paz their whole life, maybe if they come down to sea level, they might struggle with some other problems as well. Too much oxygen in their lungs, maybe, because they're not used to it. So that is very interesting. I don't think I've ever experienced altitude sickness before, but I have experienced the effects of high altitude. I went to a similar altitude when I went hiking. I climbed up some glaciers, and I just noticed I was much more out of breath. And even just walking, you feel like it's almost like breathing through a straw. Like, even if you take a big breath inwards, you don't feel like it's as oxygenating. It's not as nice as a breath at sea level. It's a very uncomfortable feeling for some people. And then I remember I was hiking with my dad one time, and he didn't think about it, and he started running. And actually, the reason he didn't think about it is because we took a cable car to the top of a mountain in where was it? It was in France, in Chamonix. It's a very popular town for skiing and stuff like that, Chamonix. And we took a cable car up, and because it was so quick and sudden, we kind of forgot how high we were, or my dad did anyway. And he did some running, and then afterwards he had to like sit down and take a breath because he forgot how high we were, and he really struggled with catching his breath after running. But yeah, anyway, I mentioned that good word, by the way, to acclimatize. Just means to get used to a new climate. It's definitely good for altitude and climate, but also it can be really anything. To acclimatize to a new way of life, you could use it in other ways. It doesn't have to be about the climate. Very useful word. So it took me quite a while to acclimatize to living in Thailand, both in terms of getting used to the weather, but also the culture and the way of life here as well. Okay, let's go to the next one now, which is the lowest point on Earth. Where do you think this could be? The lowest point. Not talking about the ocean, we're talking about land. This apparently is, well, I guess it is kind of the ocean. It's the sea. This is the Dead Sea. And apparently this is about 430 meters below sea level. That's very far down for a sea. And you may also know, I know I've had many students from this area before where they've been there, and the water in the Dead Sea is so salty, apparently 10 times saltier than the ocean water, that you can effortlessly float on the surface. If you just lie back, the salt level will help you float on the surface of the water. So that's one thing that people do there. Another thing is apparently the mud is very rich in minerals. So if you kind of put the mud over your skin and your face, it's supposed to be very good for your skin. It sounds a bit weird to me, but I suppose it kind of makes sense. But you're kind of putting all this mud over your skin. Well, I don't know. Would you try that? Would you put mud on your skin for beauty? I think I need it, so maybe I would try that myself. But yeah, I was also thinking where would be the lowest point that I have been to. And I really have no idea, because when I'm traveling, I'm not really aware of my altitude. I don't know how low I have been before. But I suppose I don't know. I mean, many places where I have lived are quite close to sea level. I've often lived by the coast, so that would be, you know, at sea level, not below sea level, but at sea level. And yeah, who knows? I don't know. What's the lowest you have been? Is it possible to answer? I don't really know. Okay, let's skip ahead, and I think they'll be easier to talk about. So, next one is the largest desert. I know my fans in Saudi Arabia and Africa are screaming right now, I know where this is, largest desert. No, you're wrong. Did you know the largest desert is Antarctica? Even though it's cold, it's not sandy, Antarctica is actually technically a desert. And let me actually find the dictionary definition for desert. Desert is a waterless, desolate area of land with no vegetation or little vegetation. So there's no water, desolate means empty, and there's not many plants. Usually covered in sand, but it doesn't have to be. So by this definition, if a place is covered in snow, it's still a desert, right? I don't know. Does snow count as water? I don't know. But apparently, Antarctica is a desert. So it covers 14 million square kilometers. A huge, huge landmass. Not as big as you might think, because on a map, it's always expanded, where it's not actually that big. If you compare it to other places, it's a little bit smaller than you might expect, but still huge, largely uninhabited place. I think it's only inhabited by scientists, right? No one really lives there other than scientists. And one thing that amazes me is it's the coldest place on Earth, which may not be surprising, but temperatures drop to as low as minus 89 degrees Celsius. 89! So unbelievable. I mean, what's the coldest you have felt before? I just can't imagine what that would feel like. Like, that's so cold. Like, can you tell a difference between minus 89 and minus 60? I can't imagine any difference. But I think for me, I haven't experienced like extreme cold. The coldest I felt in the UK is maybe minus 5. It doesn't get that cold very often. Usually it gets around 0, but minus 5, maybe I've felt that in the UK. Probably in my life, I might have felt minus 10 on some mountain somewhere. I'm not sure. I'm not always measuring, of course, but minus 10 would be my guess at how cold I've been. But yeah, what do you think? What's the coldest place you've been to? Was it on a mountain or maybe at sea level? I remember when I was in France, it was freezing. We climbed a mountain. It was probably minus 10. Very, very cold. Snow everywhere. When we descended the mountain back down to the town, it was 36 degrees. 36. Like, such a huge difference. And it was really jarring, quite surprising to go from such extreme cold to extreme heat. I know many of you will not say that's extreme, but relatively hot, isn't it? Okay, next one. This is maybe my favorite one. I'm not saving it till last. I'm doing it in the middle here. This is most isolated island. I actually did a private podcast episode a few weeks ago about these cool geographical places that I'm really interested in, and many of them were isolated islands. One of my favorite things to do on Google Maps is just zoom in to the middle of the ocean, find a really, really small island, go onto satellite view, and then be amazed that there are some houses, there's some roads on this tiny piece of land. It's like a piece of sand when you look at the planet. It's like a tiny piece of sand. And I cannot believe that people have lived there for some reason. And it's crazy to me how far away from the rest of civilization they are. It's just, for some reason, that really blows my mind. I just love thinking about that. And apparently, what is often known as the most isolated island is called Tristan da Cunha. And this is in the South Atlantic Ocean. It's in between, So I think that, yeah, it's in between South America and Africa. And it's over 2,400 kilometers from the nearest inhabited land. Right, so it's so remote that, yes, the nearest land is St. Helena, and that's, as I said, 2,400 km away. And there's one supply ship that only comes a few times every year. And there's there's quite a few interesting videos of people going to the island. It is possible to be a tourist there, but it's quite difficult to get to. And they said very interesting things, like, for example, you can get Amazon deliveries to this island, but it might take like many, many months to arrive, and other things like that. So it's really interesting that the way people are living here. And I'm pretty sure they all speak English. It's an English-speaking island. And tourism is limited, but there are usually less than 300 residents living on the island. And if you want to visit as a tourist, you need to ask for permission first, and usually you go there by boat. So it takes a while to get there as well. But let me know what you think, though. Would you be interested in living in such an isolated place? Would you like to live so far away where you know everyone really well in your community, but you have no connection to the outside world? Well, of course you have internet, but no physical connection to the outside world. Travel is hard, and just things that are convenient to us may not be convenient for them. How would you feel about that? There's many benefits for sure. I think in some ways it sounds really nice and idyllic, having such a good bond with your community. I imagine it's very, very safe. There's not really any crime there, because if you steal something, there's going to be nowhere to hide. You know, there's only a few people that live there. So I imagine there's a lot of trust on the island. And it could be quite a peaceful life. But I think for me, I would feel quite trapped. I like the feeling of having the whole world to explore and so many possibilities. And I think I've got used to that feeling. So I don't think I would be able to stay here for more than a few weeks, let's say. But I would love to visit. I hope I can visit one day. Who knows if that will happen? Let me know what you think. Let's go now to the deepest ocean trench. Trench is kind of like a hole that you dig. If you think back to World War I in Europe, people were digging trenches to hide in the ground, like kind of long holes that you would hide in and shoot out of the trench and then go back into the trench to take cover from other bullets and bombs. So ocean trenches, it's just like a big hole in the ocean, basically. And the deepest one you may know is the Mariana Trench in the Pacific Ocean. And this plunges down, this goes down to about 11,000 meters. Crazy. That's 36,000 feet. So this trench is deeper than the height of Mount Everest. If you take Mount Everest, the tallest mountain in the world, turn it upside down, this trench is still deeper. It's unbelievably deep. It's so crazy to think about. And only a few people have ever descended into the trench, including filmmaker James Cameron, who directed Avatar, and he did it in 2012. But that's something that I would never do. This is one thing that I don't understand. There's so much we don't know about the ocean deep down there, and we know a lot more about, the moon, for example. So it's a very mysterious place, and the pressure is so strong that it's just way too scary. But what I thought about, so this is what I wanted to say earlier on the first one, is I was learning about plane travel the other day. I was watching a video all about plane travel, and some planes travel at about this height, about 36,000 feet. So imagine, if you've been on an international flight before, how high the plane goes, way above the clouds. Think about how high you are. Look out the window. You can't see any cars. You can't really see houses. You're so high up, you can't really see anything apart from shapes of land, right? And that is about how deep this trench is. That height between the plane and the ground is the depth of the trench. That's crazy to think about. If you were just falling in that trench, you'd be falling for a long, long time. Or sinking, maybe I should say. That's terrifying to think about, isn't it? But yeah, I don't know. If you had an opportunity to go in the trench in a submarine, in like a submersible, would you do that? I kind of hope you will say no. If you did, I would be worried for your safety, but maybe it could be safe. I mean, James Cameron came back okay, didn't he? But yeah, very interesting place. Another thing I learned about that is, we know a lot about, we know a little bit about deep ocean animals like fish. But what many people don't consider is the pressure difference in the deep ocean and on the surface is so great that if we bring a fish from the deep ocean up to the surface, first of all, they die because that pressure change is too strong for them. So that's not good. But also their body structure changes so much because they have evolved for that strong pressurized environment, right? And when you bring them up to the surface, their body changes. So there's a very well-known picture online called the blobfish. I'm pretty sure this is one example where there's one picture of a really disgusting blobby kind of fish. It looks really disgusting. And I think the reason it looks so disgusting is because it's been taken up from that pressure. Whereas in its natural environment, it looks a little bit more in shapely, right? That's what I've heard anyway. And I think that makes sense to me. Let's do a couple more now. I think we will go to, let's do this. Let's do 4 more. I'll try to get through these somewhat fast. Longest mountain range. So the longest mountain range is the Andes. Do you know about the Andes? These are in South America. These stretch for over 7,000 kilometers. That is much further. Let me go back and check. Yeah, much, much further than the distance to the most isolated island. Really, really long way. And it's along the western coast of South America. How many listeners do we have in the Andes right now? Let me know if you are. That would be cool to imagine what it's like where you live. But yeah, it's so big that the Andes span, which means cover, 7 countries. So by the way, we can use that word span talking about distance or time. This podcast is so long, it's spanning several days. No, that's not true. If I were talking for, 48 hours, this podcast would span 2 days. But in this case, the Andes span 7 countries. So if you were to hike from one end to the other, it would take a very long time, but also you would see so many different ecosystems. You would see deserts, glaciers, hot weather, cold weather. It would be amazing to hike the whole thing. Dangerous? Perhaps. I don't know. I don't know if anyone's ever done that before, but that would be cool to hear about. One of the most famous places in the Andes that you might have heard of is Machu Picchu, which is a very iconic historical site that is in Peru. It's in the Andes in Peru, and you can visit there by taking the Inca Trail. I would like to see Machu Picchu, but I'm also afraid it's going to be way too touristy for me. I have heard there are other Inca ruins that are less touristed, but I don't know. But I mean, South America's one place I've never been to, and it's just so far away from me. I feel like I need a lot of time there. It's not the place you go to for 1 week. Because it's so hard to get there, it takes a long time. I feel like I would need a lot more time to explore, but another goal for the future. It's good to have goals, isn't it? Let's go now to some hot and cold places. Hottest place on Earth is Death Valley. You probably could have guessed by the name, right? Death Valley. I wonder why it's called that. Maybe not. So this is I think it's in California, right, in the USA. And it has recorded temperatures as high as 56 degrees Celsius. So if you're in Death Valley in the hot time of year, maybe your blood is halfway to boiling. Incredibly hot. I mean, it's also a very dry place. They almost never have rain. And I have heard, I've never been there, but I've heard it is a popular tourist destination. It is beautiful in a weird way. It's very desolate, remember, empty. But I don't know, we don't have anything like that in the UK. So for me, it's quite beautiful to see such an empty, barren place. Barren is a bit like desolate. So yeah, I think I would love to see it, but I think I would want to go with like a guide. I would be too scared because I have heard stories about tourists who go hiking, they're not used to the heat, and sadly they never return because it's just too hot and they underestimate it. So there are often warnings in place not to go at certain times of day and certain times of year. It can be very dangerous. The hottest place I've ever been? Again, I don't remember the temperature, but based on my feeling, maybe it would be Jakarta, Indonesia. I think that is the closest to the equator that I've ever been. Of course, Thailand gets quite hot. Even the UK got quite hot. Ironically, the UK was one of the hottest. It had like 42 degrees Celsius a few years ago. And that was one of the hottest I've ever felt. Ironically in the UK, right? But I think it's just because I haven't been to too many hot countries. I know some of you live in very hot countries. But I think maybe the hottest I remember was probably Indonesia. I don't know how hot it was, but I imagine it was around 40 degrees when I went. Incredibly hot. I really wasn't used to it. Yeah, it was a surprise for sure. But let me know the hottest temperature that you have ever experienced. Okay, let's do two more. I can't stop myself. They're too interesting. Let's do these quick. Coldest inhabited place. This is not the coldest place, but coldest inhabited. Inhabited means that people live there. This is always fascinating for me. There's videos on YouTube about this as well. This is, how do I pronounce this? Oymyakon. Probably nothing like that, but it looks like it's written Oymyakon. I don't know. You can correct me, but correct me, Russian speakers. But yeah, this is in Russia. And winter temperatures can reach below 50 degrees Celsius. So I guess this is going to be maybe more impressive than Antarctica because people are living in like villages and they have to adapt to live there, where they're washing clothes, getting food, stuff like that. It's a very difficult life. I saw a video on YouTube about someone who lives in this region, and it's so fascinating how they do things. Like heating the home is a very important thing. Be very careful opening the doors, because when you open the door, all the cold comes in and you can see the cold condensation rushing through the doors. And this may seem obvious, but to me, I found it really fascinating that no one had any refrigerators, because it wasn't necessary. They would have like fresh fish and fresh meat, and they would just keep it outside because it was just frozen, or maybe they have it protected from animals so animals couldn't steal it. But that was really kind of interesting to me, just to see how, okay, it's very hard to live there, but at least they don't need to pay for a fridge. I guess that's one silver lining, right? Okay, last one now, because I want to cover this one. Driest place on Earth. So again, not hottest place, but driest place. In other words, the place that gets the least amount of rain on the planet. And this is apparently the Atacama Desert in Chile, South America again, and it gets less than 1 millimeter of rain per year in some areas. If you search for this desert on Google, it's very red, very dry. It looks beautiful, but again, very barren, very desolate. I would love to go here just because it's such a different landscape for me. And I imagine the night sky would be beautiful. Going here at night would be absolutely stunning. So that's going to be added to my bucket list soon. And actually, according to what I've found here, that some areas of the desert have not seen any rain in recorded history. So it's so dry that we've never seen it rain there before. We've never written it down that it's been raining there. So that's crazy. And because of that, the landscapes in this desert are often compared to the surface of the planet of Mars, right? So a lot of, well, I don't know if that's true a lot, but some NASA tests have been carried out, have been done in this desert for Mars missions, which is crazy, but I guess that makes sense. It's logical, right? Very interesting. Personally, I'm really not good at feeling dryness. Like sometimes my friends will say like, oh, it's very dry today. It's very humid today. And I'm not really good at telling. You know, I feel like I don't have that sense when it's dry. But I suppose one thing I can tell is at nighttime, if it's very dry, I'll wake up with quite a sore throat, like a husky voice. I'll be going and clearing my throat all day. And unfortunately, when you use aircon, it dries out the room. So to cool things down, we use aircon quite a bit here in Bangkok, especially in the summer. But it does take the moisture out of the room. So in order to fight that, we also have a humidifier adding moisture back into the room. Humidifier makes the room more humid, and that does help my throat a lot. But if you do see me kind of clearing my throat in the future, I'm probably not sick. I'm probably just suffering from the dryness in my room. But okay. I think today we'll do something that we haven't done in a little while, and this is go to Spotify and look at the comments there. I'm a bit afraid to see how many I've got that I haven't read yet. So let's just go to a few recent ones and read them out, give you a shout out. I always appreciate your comments on Spotify as well, and see how they go. So some of them, let's have a look here. Let's say a thank you to Liv. And this is on episode 287, where I spoke about my trip from London to Romania. And this is honestly so meaningful to me. So Liv says, "Hi Michael, this episode was one of my favourite in your podcast. You should do more like this one. Thanks, Brenda from Mexico." So it's Brenda, not Liv. Thank you so much, Brenda. That's really kind of you. I really wasn't feeling too good about that episode. I guess it was a bit rushed and not so organised. But I'm actually quite happy to hear you liked it. So I think based on feedback that I've gotten, it seems that a lot of you prefer episodes where I talk about my own experiences and make it more personal. So if you all think that's a good idea, I can try to do that more in the future and share some stuff about my own life while talking about different topics as well. So thank you very much, Brenda. One from the same episode from Rodrigo Varas, who says, "Hello, I am from Viña del Mar in Chile. We chatted on Instagram about 2 years ago about your YouTube strolling videos, and this episode reminded me of those videos that you used to record. Also, this episode reminded me of my trips to London, Paris, Munich, Bucharest. You described the same things that I saw and the feelings about it. Great to see that you are happy in Thailand." Well, thank you so much. Good to hear from you again, Rodrigo. And I'm glad this episode reminded you of those previous videos I used to do. I'm thinking about doing more outside videos in Bangkok, maybe in the future. So we will see if they make it to the podcast. But thank you very much. I'm going to publish your comment there. One more from that episode from Hamza, who says, "You should plan to visit Morocco. It's a wonderful country." I would love to visit Morocco. I've heard mixed things. I've heard the tourist places are not so nice for different reasons, but I've heard the rest of the country is well worth seeing. And I would love to go to see, maybe outside of the tourist spots. I'd love to see a lot of your country. I've never been to Egypt before, so, would Morocco be a good first country in did I say Egypt? I was looking at the next comment. I'm in Africa. I've never been to Africa before. So I wonder if Morocco would be a good first country. Ooh, I need to finish up soon before I lose my brain completely. Okay, let me do one more now from Fatima, and this is an Egyptian listener, another African country. This was on episode Ask Me Anything 5. Fatima says, nice episode. Even if it is an ask episode, it is rich with knowledge as usual. Well, thank you. I'm glad you also liked that one. Thank you so much. Okay, let's end it here. I'm losing my mind. I need to have a break. But I really hope you enjoyed this one. We have another wonderful quote from Albert Einstein about the world. And this is, the most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science. That's a nice one. So let's open our minds, open our eyes to the mysterious in the world, the biggest, the smallest, the most interesting places that we can see. And that's a beautiful thing, in my opinion, and my good friend Albert's as well. Well, thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed this one. I will see you very soon for another episode. Goodbye. You have been listening to the Level Up English podcast. If you would like to leave a question to be answered on a future episode, then please go to levelupenglish.school/podcast. That's levelupenglish.school/podcast. And I'll answer your question on a future episode. Thanks for listening.